Welcome back to my challenging channel, Deep Thinkers. Do you guys ever talk with anybody who it seems like you're not really getting anywhere in the conversation with them? Where if you try to tell someone how you're feeling, they get offended at how you're feeling. And basically they retaliate by calling you names or by saying that you're ranting. Have you ever talked with anyone like that, Deep Thinkers? Just today, I was told that the text or texts that this person read from me made them believe that I have a chemical imbalance or a mental imbalance. And their belief has caused them to forcibly discontinue any conversation with me. Now, this same individual the other day told me that I was ranting a year ago, over a year ago, when I last had a conversation with them. And I tried to suggest that I wasn't ranting, that I was just trying to describe how I was feeling and what I interpreted as far as what had transpired. So I wrote a little song about these miscommunications. And some of you might have heard this before. It's 95 degrees in this garage where I'm playing this song. I'm sweating profusely, and this is kind of how I work out my my thoughts. I try to tell you how I feel, and your response to me is unreal. And do you hear me anyway? The things you think are alright, I'm sure they help you sleep well at night. But when you wake, was it a dream or a nightmare? We're at a crossroad once again, between the enemy and our friend. Which way we'll go, time will tell. You say my words are just a long rant. You move along just like you had planned. But can you stop to see the wake? I see the wreckage through the waves, from the way each one of us behaves. Throw out a line to save a life. It seems we've been here once before, and we're still miles and miles from the shore. And can you hear me anyway? So, that was just a quick rendition of a song called Anyway that I wrote some time ago. I wrote it actually during a point when one of my relatives was in the process of passing away. And I talked about the wake for this individual. And in fact, the song, I finished it on the day that this individual passed away. And I've mentioned that to the relatives of the person who passed away, but they don't even really seem to understand that I made a song that even included any of these aspects. And so, as I talk with people about things that I feel are challenging subjects, like for an example, the climate challenges that we're experiencing. Right now, I'm sweating profusely. It's 95 degrees in this garage. I've got a thermometer over here that tells me just as much. And in all cases, I can only venture to guess what it must feel like to wear a full fur coat and be outside during these extremely hot temperatures, where we're finally going to get down into the 90s instead of the hundreds in about a week or two. Now, we've been in the hundreds for almost 3 months continuously with very little precipitation, and our plants are dying. And the person that I got in touch with recently, I asked them to pray with me. And I know that for some of you, you might get offended if I were to ask you something that simple, to pray with me, to think about something on a positive in a positive mindset. Some of you might get offended to hear the word prayer. Some of you might get offended to hear the word meditation. Some of you might get offended to hear the word medication. And some of you might be offended when I say, I've been trying to make an appointment with you. And for whatever reason, we have been unable to talk. And in our groups, some of the people who continue to single me out say that I'm ranting about things, when in fact I'm actually just quite concerned. And maybe I have no peers to talk with about these things, because there are no peers who can look back 30 years and remember what wildlife they saw. Very few of those peers are active in their communities. Some of them might be in things like the Master Naturalist program, but hardly any of them are hiking the trails during these hot temperatures with me. Hardly any of them are visiting these parks that are under duress. Hardly any of them are seeing the bears that were circling the campgrounds last year in Big Bend. Hardly any of them are acknowledging that a bear did try to ambush me during a long run in the desert in Big Bend this year, 2 months ago. Hardly anybody can actually stop to see the wake. Hardly anybody can reflect on anything useful. And so when people tell me I'm ranting and I have not been ranting, what does that make me want to do? It makes me want to just not talk. It makes me feel insecure. And then somebody can go so far as to tell me that they think that I must have a mental imbalance. Well, that just makes me want to talk, not rant. And if people were talking back, then we would be talking with each other. I'm still talking with the individual who said that I was ranting and who said that I was mentally imbalanced. I'm talking with them specifically. And in the meanwhile, of course, I'm just sharing it here because, well, what option do I have if someone chooses to not communicate with me? The problem we have in this world, in this country even, in this era, is that people think that they can be so entitled that they don't have to talk with anybody. Anybody who is not, for whatever reason, in the same class. Anybody who, for whatever reason, we perceive doesn't have the same values. We don't have to talk to anybody anymore. We can choose to single out whoever we want to in a communication, and to eliminate anyone who we wanted to from a conversation just by no longer talking with them. These, to me, are dangerous aspects that only our fathers can help us with. And if we can't learn to talk with our fathers, or to even say the Our Father, for an example, which is just several lines of peaceful text, then maybe we don't deserve our daily bread. Maybe we don't deserve to be forgiven because we can't forgive other people. In my group right now, someone who's watching this right now, I know that one of our relatives reached out to you and you are not responding to them for some reason. My relatives, even the ones who robbed my own direct parent, when they talk with me, I get back in touch with them. But for whatever reason, they can pick and choose what they want to respond to. Recently, I had a younger cousin pass away from heart failure. And I wonder if it wasn't because he had a broken heart. Not just because of the crappy food that we've all been eating. Not because of the crappy lies that we've all been fed. But because maybe he had a broken heart. There are other people out there like myself who might be too angry to die from a broken heart. Who might be too focused on the situation, knowing that it needs to be corrected. And so we've got motivation. And with that motivation, we also have mediocre talent on our side. If this mediocre talent could drive the viewership to the point where I had 1,000 views, then maybe that person would have given me some credit when I said, hey, I made a video about this last year. It's entitled Bye Felicia. And it talks about how narcissists can covertly and discreetly pretty much pick on whoever they want, whoever they've been able to pick on for whatever reason. I'm not one to be picked on. My direct relative who got robbed, they burned down the house that my grandparents left to me. And then that house was robbed from my direct relative. And for whatever reason, I allowed all these things to continue to happen without going through some kind of a court system to try and get help. Why do I want to get help with someone who wants to be that vicious towards me? The only reason I want to at some point is basically so we can have a conversation. I believe that I deserve the conversation that we haven't had about some of these topics. I believe that if you think I'm ranting, just wait until I actually go off. And then maybe you'll hear a rant. But for right now, all of this energy is being channeled into something called music and words and thoughts. And these thoughts, I share them openly and considerately. And I try to share all of the wonderful things that I see. Right here, in the same place that I've been doing that since the beginning of when I started this account. And for whatever reason, I've continued to be met with people who think that I'm ranting and that I don't want to be friends, or that I'm mean to other people, or that I've disrespected a situation so much that we can't even hang out anymore. How do you think that makes me feel? It doesn't make me feel insecure. It makes me feel like I have more time. I used to get worried about whether someone cared about what I was doing or what I thought. And then I recognized we were taught that there was a peacemaker. We were taught that there was a creator. For whatever reason, some of the people who are listening to this right now will say, well, your God is not the same as my God. How do you know? How many of us have met any of our creators except for our parents? Aside from our parents, how many of us have met our creators? And we can't even regard our creators as something that's worth talking with. In my generation, right now, it seems that the tables have been reversed and our creators don't even think it's worth talking with us. How do I know this? Because where are they? Where are our fathers? Do you think this is a rant? Or do you think that I've somehow channeled the words? I try to tell you how I feel, but your response to me is unreal. And can you hear me anyway? The things you think are all right. I'm sure they help you sleep well at night. But when you wake, was it a dream or a nightmare? I see the crossroad once again between the enemy and our friend. Which way we'll go? Time will tell. You say my words you don't understand. You move along just like you had planned. But can you stop to see the wake? What do you see during that wake? I see the wreckage through the waves from the way each one of us behaves. Throw out a line to save a life. Hopefully there's a flotation device attached to that line. In this case, I threw out some lines in the form of a song. Did that make sense to you? Throw out a line to save a life. It seems we've been here once before, and we're still miles and miles from the shore. And do you hear me? Anyway, some people might continue to argue even though they're floating out into a riptide. Continue to argue with someone because they have no sight other than their fixed anger. That's a mental imbalance. That's a lack of responsibility. That's a lack of compassion. That's a lack of empathy. that is the true sickness in our society. I don't have a mental imbalance. The imbalance I have is being able to communicate with people who will not communicate in return with me. That's the only imbalance that there has been, and I'm only mentioning it on this channel while I sweat out all of these toxins, because I want it to be known fully, especially with my family, that you could have helped communicate. You could have helped all of us communicate. For my friends, well, the same thing goes for you guys. For all of the people here who understand what I'm going through, you're probably going through something similar, because we are all collectively going through a challenge right now that's trying to keep us from communicating the singular message of how do we lift each other up? How can we lift each other up if we can't lift ourselves up? That's why I try to write music. That's why I try to redesign this space so it looks good to me, to others. It's clean enough that I can do a routine clean, deep clean over and over. It's just a space, and it's just an external representation of what I've got going on inside myself. I've had to rearrange a lot of things, but I never in my mind ever thought as a child growing up that the people who I was growing up with would be so unable to communicate that we just come to this blockade, keeping us from escaping the fires, keeping us from leaving the areas that are being burned. And we turn each other back into the fires. And when people ask about these devastating situations, the elders can't even answer. What's wrong with this picture? That's what I think about when I think about trying to tell you how I feel. I hope everyone who is watching this can understand that I've only said this as passionately as I could because I have compassion. And if I didn't say it a certain way, maybe someone in here would not hear what was being said because they're simply unable to hear. They're unable to hear possibly because there is a spiritual block. That's why many of us who say chosen ones, and I say many of us inclusively because I've mentioned that term before, but many people will say chosen ones have to go through this alone. That's not true. You're just not looking for the rest of the chosen ones. You're just following a path. You're immersed in all of this chaos, and you can't quite figure out why is it that you can't communicate with someone else. It's because other people don't have the same direction as you. All you have to do is maintain your course. I see the wreckage through the waves. It seems we've been here once before, and we're still miles and miles from the shore. Do you hear me? Anyway, if there was someone in my presence who was floating in the riptide and they could not understand that we were going to die if we kept floating out to sea, I have two choices. I can either try and beat the other person into unconsciousness so I can carry them somehow all the way miles and miles back to the shore, or I can just save myself. That's what all of us should be looking to do. We need to save ourselves first. Put our own masks on, our own oxygen on, before we help anyone else. So for many of us who are just trying to judge all of everybody, we can't begin to help anyone because we're too fixated on the problems. We can't even comment here. We can't even continue to be a subscriber. And that's fine with me. The last thing I need is any of this negative energy that causes me continuous wheel spinning. I want to get traction. I've got my 4x4. I wrote a song. I wrote a whole catalog of songs that I hope that you're looking forward to just as much as I am. I haven't begun recording this latest catalog because I want to get everything set up precisely so I can just go to work. The moment that I do that, the moment that it starts taking off, the moment that I recognize who wasn't there to support any of this activity is also the moment when I get to express again and again forgiveness. But how do you genuinely forgive someone who only grovels to you because they think that you're somebody to grovel to? Maybe you just distance yourself so far that they can't even recognize you anymore when they finally see you. Those are my thoughts for today. It's a hot day. I got to see a gigantic moth today. It was beautiful. And the birds have water. They're about to get some new replenishments for their bird seed. And I made this video. In addition to everything else that I did beyond what I mentioned, I also made this video for you. So you can take time to recognize you're not the only one going through these situations. This is how I deal with it efficiently, effectively, compassionately, and in a way where whether I get to talk to that person that I was addressing or not, I'm talking to someone just like them. That's how it is. Different levels, different devils. At every level, there's going to be basically the shared devils. They're just at different levels. That's how life is. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and all that old school stuff.